Okay, so for Tuesday, we have readings Fielding on the Jacobite Rebellion and Sancho on the Gordon Riots. These are two separate rebellions that happened. They happened at different times, but they do have one, among other things, in common, one thing in common. That is that there's a significant religious element in both. And so it's going to be easier for you to follow what's going on if you understand a little bit about how religion works in 18th century Britain and Ireland. And it might also be helpful to you for the rest of the readings in the course because you're going to see religious references come up over and over again. My goal in this talk is that even if you know very little about religion at all, you're going to be able to follow it more effectively because you're getting some background now. And if you know a lot about religion or you're a religious practitioner yourself, that might be the case, and you could still feel totally confused about religion in Britain because it's kind of got a crazy history, which I'm going to tell you about now. So to start out with first, there are these two terms you see on the screen, Catholic and Protestant. What's the difference between Catholics and Protestants? What are Catholics and Protestants? They are both Christians. So these are both Christian denominations. The Christian church starts out as the Catholic Church, and then when people had objections to Catholicism, they protested and left the church. So those protesters become Protestants. Protestants are Christian denominations that have left the Catholic Church. This is a lot of different groups. This would be Presbyterians, Lutherans, most evangelical groups are going to be Protestant groups. And especially in Great Britain, which we're talking about, the one that we want to look at is the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church, by the way, is known as the Episcopalian Church in the United States, and it is a Protestant church, and it is the official church of England and Wales. Unlike in the United States, where we believe in the separation of church and state, so there's no official religion, England has an official religion. In fact, the official religion for England is the Anglican Church. Get that down. So England and Wales are Anglican. Scotland is Presbyterian. And Ireland, you would think would be Catholic because most of the people in Ireland are Catholic, but the official Church of Ireland in the 18th century, not now, the official Church of Ireland in the 18th century was actually the Anglican Church. This was a source of great frustration and anger because most of the people were Catholic, but their taxes went to support a Protestant church of their rulers rather than popular church. But that is another story. We're going to go back to England and Wales and ask why the Anglican Church? Why are they Protestants in England? And the reason that they are Protestants in England is because King Henry VIII wanted a divorce. So Henry VIII, that is not, I need a period there. Henry VIII is married to Catherine of Aragon. And he doesn't want to be married to her anymore. So he says to the Pope, hey, will you grant me a divorce? And the Pope says, no way, I'm not granting you a divorce. You asked my permission especially to marry Catherine because you guys are related. And I said, yes. And so now I can't say no because that would undermine my authority. So forget it. And Henry said, fine, then you are no longer the head of the church in England. I am. We're now Protestant Anglicans. So the reason that England is a Protestant country is because Henry wanted to take control of the church himself so he could do what he wanted to do. And by the way, make a major land grab and take all the money and lands that had belonged to the church and give them to his friends instead and build loyalty that way. So he said, we're not Catholic anymore, we're Protestant. And that held. And then Henry was able to marry Anne Boleyn. Okay. He divorced Catherine. He married Anne Boleyn. Later on, he decides he's not happy with Anne Boleyn, and so he beheads her rather than starting a new church. This time he just cuts her head off, and then he goes on to have 4 more wives. But these are the 2 important wives as far as the religion goes, because under Catherine, England is a Catholic country. Under Anne Boleyn, England is a Protestant country. Eventually, Henry dies, and he is succeeded very, very briefly by his son, who does not survive him for very long. And then he is succeeded by his daughter, Mary, Queen Mary. You may have heard of her as Bloody Mary. Mary is the daughter of Catherine, okay? So guess what? Mary's like, forget Protestantism. We're going back to the church that honored my mother. England is now Catholic. Yay, if you're Catholic. Okay. Then Mary dies. She doesn't have an heir, so she's succeeded by Henry's second surviving daughter, Elizabeth. Guess who Elizabeth's mom is? Elizabeth's mother is Anne Boleyn. So what does Elizabeth do with religion? Guess what? Now we are Protestant. Okay, so you can imagine the sort of feeling of whiplash that is going on, especially because it's not really a matter of whether your religion is there or not there, and you can be whatever you want. If you're on the wrong side, you can get your head cut off, or you can lose your property, or any number of things can happen to you. So, so then Elizabeth, for what it's worth, she dies in 1603. Okay, and our Jacobite rebellions are in 1745. Okay, so essentially people have been arguing about religion and flipping back and forth between Catholic and Protestant because this continues to happen with Elizabeth's successors, the Stuarts. Sometimes they're Catholic, sometimes they're Protestant. They're officially Protestant, they're rumored to be Catholic. All of this stuff going on. And so there are still these religious struggles continuing. So by the time you get to 1745 and the Jacobite rebellions, everybody's really sick of it. And the Jacobite rebellions are fought back. The Stuart monarchs who were represented by the Jacobite rebellions are put forever aside. And England remains an Anglican Protestant country from then until the present. So you've got religious continuity after that. So another thing worth mentioning here, and I think you can tell this from the readings, whether or not you are Catholic or Protestant, as I said, it's a big deal because if you're in the wrong group, you can get your head cut off during the, when they're having civil wars over this. Even when things have calmed down though, and even after these Jacobite rebellions in 1745, when England is an Anglican country officially and to this day, there are still many social and political dimensions that attach to religion. The most important ones for this class is that there are political and financial reasons why it's good to be in the dominant group, why it's good to be an Anglican. You're going to see some references to the Test Act, and the Test Act is a law that refers to a test that you have to take in order to hold office in the government or the military. So to be an official in the military or to hold office in Parliament, to be elected to office, you have to be Anglican. Benjamin Disraeli, who becomes Prime Minister of England in the 19th century, was Jewish, but the only reason he was allowed to be Prime Minister is that his father got very angry with the local rabbi and had his children baptized Anglican when they were babies, and so he's Anglican, and so he can hold office. Otherwise, as a Jewish man, he would not have been able to hold office. So you can see this carries well into later centuries. It's not just an 18th century thing. There are also restrictions on owning property that are there. If you can't own certain kinds of property if you are not an Anglican. So it's really not just a religious thing, it's a huge thing socially, and it's a huge thing politically, and it is very much about power relationships. And one thing I want to mention about the Gordon riots that you see referred to in Sancho's writing. The backstory on that is that there were legal discriminations against Catholics. So Catholics were not allowed legally to do certain things. These were eased by the 1778 Catholic Relief Act. It gave Catholics more rights than they had had before. And Lord George Gordon thought that was a bad idea. He didn't want Catholics to have those rights, but he wanted them to go back to being discriminated against more as they had been before. It's important to note that this is class and immigration based as well as religiously based. So one of the things going on with the Gordon riots, you see a lot of working class Protestants agitating to have Catholics lose their rights. And this is partly because they are concerned about Irish immigrants coming in and taking their jobs. Does this sound familiar to you? So the working class English Protestants are concerned about Irish immigrants taking their jobs, and the Irish immigrants are typically Catholic. So it is in their interest to have Catholics not be able to do certain things. So that's pretty much all I want to say to orient you. Hopefully this will help you through the readings, and hopefully it will show how even in this bizarrely alien situation where you're dealing with religions and official religions flip-flopping with various British monarchs, even there you can see there are still some really key overtones with our own times as far as the role of religion in establishing not just spiritual but also social and political well-being for different groups of people. Thanks for your time.